Want to add a dialogue system to your Unreal 5 game? In this tutorial, I'll show you how to create one using blueprints. We'll cover UI, branching choices, and more. Let's jump in. I recommend making a new project and using the third-person template. And I'm just going to name this dialogue, and then you save it where you want to save it. Now that we're in a fresh project, I'm going to make a new folder for everything that we're going to do today. And I'm going to call it Kettles Dialogue. And inside here, we want to create some more folders for everything. So I'm going to make one for the data tables, which will be what the dialogue is stored in. One for the setup, which is going to have most of the blueprint and the code in it, and one for the widget. And while we're here, we might as well just make an empty actor and call this something like test, which we're going to test the dialogue on. Now, we're going to start with the setup stuff. So we want to create a new blueprint class and go into all classes and search for actor component. And we want to name this one dialogue activator. This will be what is on anything that has dialogue. And then we want to create another one, actor component, and call this dialogue player. And this is what we're going to put onto the third person character to give it the functionality. Now we also want to create a enumerator or enumeration, which is basically a variable with different states in it. So we're going to call this dialogue mode. And then we're going to open up this and add 4. Call this one listen. This one answer. This one end. And then we also want a none as well. Listen is going to be a simple, the NPC is talking to you, you click, and then it goes to the next part of the dialogue. Answer is going to be when we want options to come up that we can click. End is going to close the dialogue after we click again. And then none is just going to do nothing, but this is important because we don't want to just skip through all the dialogue. So when it's none, your clicking will do nothing. So now we also want to create a struct, which is basically a variable that can store a bunch of different variables inside of it. And we want to call this one dialogue struct. We want to create another one and call this dialogue option. Now we open up dialogue option and switch this to a string, and we can give it a name as well. I'm going to name it option text, and this is going to be the text that's on an option button. And dialogue struct, we want to have the name of the NPC. So let's just do NPC name. We want to have the dialogue mode here, and just call this mode. We also want to have a string, which is what the NPC is saying. So let's just give this text. And we want one more, which has the dialogue option. And we also want this as an array, so we can have multiple of them. And just call this option, or options. Now, the last thing we need to make here is a interface. A blueprint interface, and this is going to be called dialogue interface. And this is basically what's going to activate or send data across different blueprints to activate the dialogue system. So we want to go inside here, and it creates a new function. We want to call this initiate dialogue, and we want to add some inputs here. So the first input is going to be the player, which is going to be a reference to the dialogue player. We want a reference to the data table. So let's call that NPC DT for NPC data table. And we just want this to be a data table reference. And we want one more for the activator, which is a reference to the blueprint that has the data table inside of it. And then we just look for dialogue activator. Go into the player and open up the full blueprint editor. And to add the interface into here, we need to go into class settings, go down to interfaces, implemented interfaces, add, and then do dialogue interface. That makes it so we can now use that interface. And also open up dialogue activator and add a variable and call it data table. Make it a data table, and also click this so we can edit it in the world and give every object a different data table. That's it for this episode. In the next episode, I'm going to be walking through how I made the widgets.